will the country be post-Merkel? A change of direction, barred from blocking the M25. Insulate Britain climate protesters turn their attention to Dover. And why the UK's mosques haven't just issued a call to prayer today, but also a call for climate action. Hello and welcome to the UK's only daily climate news show, where we track the changes happening to our world right now and challenge those coming up with the solutions. Now, Germans will vote this Sunday in elections that will see Angela Merkel's 16-year reign as Chancellor come to an end. Climate change has played heavily in the election campaign. At one point, the Green Party was even leading the polls. It's now slipped to third place, but the results could still see it become part of a coalition government. So let's have a look at just how green, or otherwise, Germany is. So the country is Europe's biggest emitter of carbon dioxide, and its energy mix is still heavily reliant on fossil fuels. In 2019, about 77% of Germany's energy came from fossil fuels. That compares to just 22% of energy from renewables. Just 5% of the country's energy comes from nuclear, compared to about 36% in neighbouring France. This is partly because since 1998, Germany has been phasing out nuclear energy, which has always been unpopular. After the 2011 Fukushima disaster, it immediately shut down 8 of its 17 reactors and plans to shut all of its plants by next year. In June, Germany adopted an amendment to its climate law, together with an €8 billion climate emergency programme, following a constitutional court ruling that its climate targets were too weak and put future generations in danger. But even with the amendment, Germany's scheduled 2038 coal phase-out is incompatible with the 1.5-degree warming limit of the Paris Agreement. Well, our Europe correspondent, Adam Parsons, is in Munich this evening. Adam, just how much has climate featured in the campaigning in the run-up to this weekend's elections?
It's a significant factor. For about 20-25% of voters, it is the number one thing. But there's no doubt that it's playing a big part in this election. The reason we're in Munich is just round the corner from us. We have a conference centre where the CDU, that is Angela Merkel's party, have been holding one of their last rallies. Armin Laschet, the contender for them, is there along with all the great and the good from the CDU, but they are trailing in the polls at the moment going to these final days. And climate is one of the reasons. The Green Party is polling better than it has done in previous elections. Perhaps picking up a bit on some of the anger after those floods that we had just a few months ago. They haven't had the pickup they might expect. But certainly for younger voters particularly, I think it's important. Big protests across Germany today, including in Berlin, where the crowd was addressed by Greta Thunberg. Here's what she told them.
We must vote, you must vote. But remember that voting only will not be enough. We must keep going into the streets, and we must keep demanding our leaders to take real climate action.
Of course, Greta Thunberg is Swedish. She won't be voting in this, but over 60 million people will. Now, at the moment, the predictions are that yet again Germany will have a coalition. How that looks, we simply don't know. And it takes potentially weeks, maybe even months, to put that coalition together. The Merkel reign could continue. One person told us today they thought it might go up until Christmas. It will be down to Annalena Baerbock, the leader of the Greens, to play her cards correctly. One analyst telling me that actually he thinks that she may have a stronger position to force a climate agenda if she's part of a coalition rather than the Chancellor.
Adam, thank you. And we're going to be discussing whether climate change is a key issue for German voters on today's debate. I'm going to be joined by the economist Vicky Price and Professor of Global Change Science at UCL and the University of Leeds, Simon Lewis. That's in a few minutes' time. Now, after blocking sections of the M25 5 times in the past fortnight, Insulate Britain protesters were banned by the High Court this week from blocking the motorway and threatened with prison by the Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps. So, today, members of the Extinction Rebellion offshoot changed tack and headed for Dover, where 39 people were arrested after blocking the entrance to the port. Sky's Aisha Zahid was there.
Insulate Britain have been protesting in Dover today. Around 40 protesters blocking off access to the port of Dover, the A2, and a third group blocking a part of the A20. And not only have they disrupted roads today, but also channel crossings. Now, we saw similar tactics being used as we have seen in their previous protests, hands being glued to the road, and 2 activists also mounted a tanker. It took nearly 5 hours to get them off. Understandably, there were lots and lots of frustrated and angry motorists on the road, and the government's also come back and said that they are taking action against these guerrilla tactics being used to prevent them from happening in the future. Now, Insulate Britain are demanding that the government does more to make homes more energy efficient to help tackle climate change. They protested on the M25 5 times. The government's been granted an injunction against them for this. They've also held demonstrations on the M3 and M11. More than 200 arrests made so far, and it's not stopping them. They say they're not scared of being arrested. They're not scared of government injunctions. What they are fearful of is climate change.
Now, in some of today's other climate news, big businesses, including BT, Thames Water and the Co-op, have called on the government to phase out gas power by 2035. In a letter shared exclusively with Sky News, the business told ministers the time's right for the UK to signal an end to the use of unabated fossil fuels. Net sustainability told us it was all important in the light of recent price hikes.
Well, we've seen the rising cost of importing gas is pushing up prices for both businesses and consumers, and this trend is set to continue. So the best way for us to guarantee energy security in the UK is by generating our own electricity from clean sources. And of course, this can play a massive role in tackling climate change.
500,000 acres of the Scottish Highlands are to be rewilded as part of efforts to restore nature. The 30-year project will increase connected habitats and species diversity across the Afric Highlands. That's an area between the west coast of Scotland and Loch Ness. Plans include planting trees, enhancing river corridors, restoring peat bogs and creating nature-friendly farming practices. Homeowners affected by flooding are spending an average of £5,250 each year to protect and repair their homes. According to research from the Climate Coalition, homeowners living on floodplains are also paying more for contents insurance. The Environment Agency estimates that 5.2 million properties in the UK are currently at risk of flooding, and climate change could cause that number to double in the next 50 years. Now, hundreds of mosques across the UK didn't just issue a call for prayer today. They also used their Friday sermons to call for action on climate change. The message was organised by the Muslim Charities Forum as part of the Big Green Week. Sky's Sadia Chowdhury has this report.
Zeki Ismail is a farm shop owner who doesn't like to give his customers much choice. Chicken, duck, turkey. It doesn't matter what you go for here. You have to choose ethical.
When we're looking at tayyib, it's something that's pure, it's natural, it's ethical, it's a natural way of raising livestock, and it's a clean, and it's a product that's clean, and not just with meat, also with fruit and vegetables, and anything else that we would consume or anything else that we would tend to do in our lives.
The search for ethical farming led Zeki to this farm in Sevenoaks, where animals are grass-fed. Muslims eat above average quantities of meat, which explains why the halal market is one of the fastest growing in the UK's meat industry. But many focus only on halal, forgetting that ethical, or tayyib, is just as important. A more Islamic diet, Muslim communities could have a big impact on how we tackle climate change on British farms.
Eat those foods that are halal and that are also pure for you as well.
Today at Friday prayers across the country, a reminder that fussy eaters will go to heaven.
300 mosques are putting climate change at the heart of their sermons, and it's not just about making better dietary choices, but also things like switching to renewable energy and reducing how much we consume. The Imam is using early Islamic traditions to try and win over his audience.
At Al Iman Centre in Bromley, Imam Abdullah explains why addressing climate change is central to Islam.
Islamically, we believe that God created the universe, God created the earth, and He has placed us in this planet, on this earth, as custodians or caretakers, meaning that as humankind we have to take care of ourselves, take care of other humankind, also take care of the plant life, take care of the animals and the environment.
Muslims are being reminded to make more ethical, more Islamic choices, and the message is clear. Protect the world you live in, and that could be what gets you to heaven once you've left. Sadia Chowdhury, Sky News.
Do stay with us, because coming up after the break, I'm going to be joined by the economist Vicky Price and Professor of Global Change Science Simon Lewis, and we're going to be discussing if Germany is a climate change leader and whether it's realistic for the UK to phase out gas power by 2035. Back in a moment.
So I am going part of the Amazon biome to Guyana, and I'm crossing the Kanuku Mountains. Now, the Kanuku Mountains are a protected area in Guyana, which is very, very special, and they're full of a lot of high jungle mountains, and it's a long way. I'm basically trekking the width of Guyana. The jungle expeditions, it's so dense, so we can expect to sometimes only be moving a whole day, 1 kilometer maybe in a day. It's going to be hard. It's going to be uncharted, unknown. The only maps I have really are back from the 70s, and they were done by someone in a plane going past with a camera, so they're not that reliable. But it's just going to be a case of getting on the ground and seeing what happens. The main reason for doing this expedition is to both celebrate and make people aware of what can be achieved when we protect our wild places. It's very, very amazing that Guyana have protected these Kanuku Mountains, and they're so full of biodiversity as a result of it. So that's the first thing. The other thing I want to do with this expedition is to both inspire and empower, hopefully, more people to just get out there and go for it and achieve their dreams and see their potential, because that's definitely what this is about for me. I crossed this mountain range from south to north last year, a much shorter journey, but it gave me a taste of what's to come. And during that journey, right in the middle of the worst point where any danger could show itself came, and we got surrounded by bushmaster snakes and jaguars, and it sounds like something from a horror film, but I'm very aware that these are big risks. Other risks are river crossings, deadfall, which is trees falling, and of course like infections and heat exhaustion. But it's all managed risk. It's all things that I've thought about and trained for, and myself and my great team are ready for it. I'm traveling with 4 awesome Amerindians, all of whom I know from previous expeditions in the jungle, so I've handpicked them. Their skills and their tribal skills, they're from different tribes around the area, are just going to be so useful. And the dynamic that we have is very, very special, you know.
We don't understand that every lake or a pond is a habitat in itself, which houses frogs, snakes, crabs, turtles, birds, so many different life forms. Human beings directly depend on underground water source. So a lake or a pond is necessary to replenish these groundwater resources.
Did you know that driving us to school creates extra toxic air at drop-off and pick-up times?
The weather stays fairly quiet and warm over the weekend. We could see daytime highs up to around 24, even 25 degrees Celsius. There's a good deal of dry weather around too, but also large amounts of cloud at times, early mist and fog in the south, and later on we'll see some more persistent rain working its way towards the northwest, although it'll be Sunday before it comes through. So a largely fine day, top temperatures again around 24, even 25 degrees Celsius. Fairly breezy with strong winds in the north, so air pollution levels will be low.
The Air Quality Report, sponsored by Philips Air Purifiers.
Hello and welcome back to the Daily Climate Show here on Sky News. And we're getting straight to discussing the climate issues of the day with the economist Vicky Price and Simon Lewis, Professor of Global Change Science at UCL and the University of Leeds. There they are. And we've been looking ahead of Sunday's German election that will see the end of Angela Merkel's 16 years in power at the country's green credentials. The climate has featured heavily in the election campaign. But is Germany as green as it would like to think? Simon and Vicky, thank you so much for joining us. Simon, let's start with you. Just how green is Germany?
Germany's not that green in that about a quarter of its electricity is coming from coal-fired power stations, very polluting, and is coming from the worst kind of coal, lignite. And it doesn't have a phase out until 2038. And to put that in context, Xi Jinping, the Chinese leader, announced at the UN that it would phase out all overseas financing of coal-fired power stations and struck out 47 coal-fired power stations with that one sentence. And that's about the same carbon emission stopped as Germany's emitting with its coal-fired power stations today. And on cars, it doesn't have any phase-out date for ending the sale of new petrol and diesel cars. And without that, and with the coal, the Supreme Court in Germany said that Germany's climate policies were unconstitutional because young people wouldn't have a good life in the future because these policies were not consistent with the Paris Agreement.
It's interesting, isn't it? A recent poll found that 65% of Germans are in favour of stricter measures to fight climate change. Vicky, what do you think? It's interesting that the Greens are in third place. You'd think with that sort of public support, they'd be right up there in first, wouldn't you?
You would indeed, but of course we must remember that Germany is a major manufacturing country. It has a much larger percentage of manufacturing in its GDP than is the case in the UK. So phasing out all that, because lots of energy-intensive sectors there, which will find it difficult to move to, using cleaner energy, because basically not much cleaner energy is necessarily supplied. And what is going on right now, of course, is that Germany is relying heavily on gas that comes out of Russia. It has said it's going to stop any new nuclear, and of course that's being phased out. So it's limited in terms of what it can actually do. But I think on the positive side, we need to bear in mind that it's very much part of the push right now that the EU is making in terms of clean green bonds, raising money that can be spent in more energy efficient production. And of course, it's also moving way ahead of other countries in battery production. So there is still a lot that is happening. The question is, how fast can they move to meet what the population wants? But as you say, interestingly, the Greens are not doing as well as perhaps you would have expected, which suggests to me that the Germans still value quite a lot of what is being produced right now by the industry there that exists at present.
Simon, let's go back to this court ruling that you mentioned. April 2021, a court ruled that Germany's climate change laws are insufficient. Again, it looks like all the right noises are being made. Angela Merkel herself was a supporter of climate protection measures. Do you think we are going to see a change after these elections, that change will actually take place and it won't just be talk?
Well, I think it's going to be difficult to say, and that's because the German electoral system is different from the UK, and they will have a coalition. But if it's a coalition between some of the left parties and the Green Party, then that probably gives the greatest chance of really shifting policies towards a much greener agenda, whether that's green homes, electric vehicles, and getting their electricity supply onto renewables as fast as possible.
OK, well, let's leave the Germans. We'll obviously find out this weekend how that election will play out, because we've also heard today that big UK businesses, including BT, Thames Water, the Co-op and Nestle, have called on the government to phase out gas power by 2035. That's just 14 years away. So is it achievable? Vicky, what do you think? 40% of the UK's electricity generation comes from gas plants. Do you think we can phase it out by 2035?
I think it's going to be rather difficult. The reason why they're calling for it, of course, is because of the increase that we've just seen in gas prices. There is a belief that we don't have enough security of supply, and therefore we need to move into something else. Now, the question is, are they asking for this because it's clean, or are they asking for this because they really want to make sure that whatever power there is comes easily to the very sectors that need it? And, you know, it could be a combination of the two, which would be interesting. But it costs a lot to move from where we are now in terms of using different type of fuel, if you like, in those very heavy energy-intensive sectors, like, for example, steels and chemicals and cement, where the costs are very, very great in terms of moving into something else, and they use huge amount of heat for the process of production that they've got at present. So it is going to be difficult. It will require a lot more investment than what we've got planned at present.
Simon, what do you think, given what we're seeing at the moment, not having to rely on gas imports? It sounds like it would be an excellent thing.
Yes, it would be. And I don't think it's that much of a surprise that these household names have called for it, because the government statutory body on advising them on climate change, the Committee on Climate Change, actually says that unabated gas should be over by 2035. So it's actually consistent with what the messages that the government is getting, and what we are seeing here is a kind of a difference between what the most cost-effective and the least disruptive way forward that the Committee on Climate Change is laying out, and the policies that have been put in place and not been put in place in a timely manner to get us there. And I think on fossil fuels, there was a great report out last week from Oxford University that showed that for fossil fuels that are the costs that are adjusted for inflation, they have not got any cheaper over the last 140 years, whereas renewables have been decreasing in price incredibly rapidly. They are 2,000 times cheaper today than they were 50 years ago. So it makes sense to get onto renewables and off fossil fuels. And Vicky is correct in that there are some industrial processes that require huge amounts of heat, but carbon-free production of steel has already started in Sweden, and the UK needs to get at the beginning and the head of that curve and move to those green industries to get those green jobs and a transition away from these dirty, heavy industries towards green industries.
But Vicky, it does all come down to money, doesn't it, getting there? The Lesser even says the move would require a significantly greater level of investment in renewables that has been possible to date, and that's £14 billion a year. I mean, who's going to foot that bill?
Well, that's a very good point. I think what the government needs to do right now is to share the risk, if you like, with the private sector. There is a lot of money around that can be invested in green technology. As we've seen, you know, the people are buying up companies like there's no tomorrow, and they are prepared to support lots of governments who are trying to raise money. So there is a lot of liquidity around that can be used properly to support a cleaner economy. The problem is that the risks involved with technology are still very great. So governments, I'm afraid, have to step in, like they're doing in the EU. I think we need to do that in the UK as well, and share that risk and give a sort of guarantee to whoever may want to go down that investment route. But without that, I think there would be a lot of reluctance to engage in something which may just lead to no results at all for individual investors.
OK. Vicky Price, Simon Lewis, thank you so much. It's been fantastic talking to you. Have a great weekend. Thank you. That's everything from us for this week, but do stay tuned, because coming up next on Sky News tonight, ministers hold crisis talks on how the national shortage of lorry drivers can be resolved as queues